Chief Adekunle sat in his expansive study, his eyes scanning the room filled with relics of a life built on hard work and cunning strategy. His walls bore witness to decades of achievements, certificates, awards, and photographs of him shaking hands with the most influential figures in Africa. But none of these mementos could quell the unease that gnawed at him now, a sense of impending failure that had nothing to do with his business empire. "Oba, I can't take these doubts to my grave," he confided in his longtime confidant, Oba, a man with whom he'd shared many of his life's victories and secrets. "I've built everything with the sweat of my brow, but I fear I have raised my family in comfort, not strength. They need to be tested, or all this," he gestured around the room, "will mean nothing." But before we dive deeper into this tale, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter. Oba nodded, understanding the gravity behind his friend's words. "What do you propose, Chief?" A slow smile spread across Adekunle's face, one that spoke of an audacious plan. "I'll fake my death," he said. "A car accident. Let's see how they handle everything in my absence." Oba's eyebrows shot up, but he remained composed. "And where will you go?" "A village far from here. Somewhere remote where I can watch everything unfold," Adekunle replied. "We'll install cameras around the estate, hidden well. I need to see who they become without me around." Over the next few weeks, preparations were made. Adekunle and Oba planned every detail meticulously. A fake accident was orchestrated with a willing local reporter who owed Adekunle a favor. A believable obituary was drafted, and hidden cameras were installed around his mansion. Finally, Adekunle disappeared under the cover of night, traveling to a secluded village known for its anonymity. The stage was set, and the game had begun. The news broke early one morning. Chief Adekunle, the magnate of Ghana, had died in a tragic car accident. His family, still groggy from sleep, was jolted into reality by the sound of a wailing housemaid who had seen the headlines splashed across the television screen. Confusion gave way to panic as each member of the family gathered in the grand living room, faces marked with shock and disbelief. Adekunle's two wives, Aisha and Kemi, were the first to feel the weight of the news. Aisha, the elder wife, who had always managed the household with a stern hand, fell silent. Her eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were now wide with a mixture of fear and grief. Kemi, younger and known for her more indulgent lifestyle, wept openly, clutching her eldest son for support. Their 5 children, Chika, Bayo, Femi, Ayo, and Obi, each reacted in their own way. Chika, the eldest, immediately began thinking of the empire left behind, his mind racing with possibilities. Femi and Ayo exchanged glances filled with both fear and greed, sensing an opportunity wrapped in loss. Obi, the youngest, sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the screen but his mind elsewhere, pondering the gravity of the situation. The family gathered for a formal reading of the will, where Oba, now playing the role of executor, read aloud the last testament of Chief Adekunle. The estate, valued at $28 billion, was to be divided among the 2 wives and 5 children, each receiving a substantial sum. As the numbers were announced, a tense silence fell over the room. The wealth that had once seemed boundless was now being quantified and distributed. It didn't take long for the air of grief to turn into one of calculation. Plans were whispered, alliances silently formed, and a sense of competition began to take root. Adekunle's words echoed in their minds. Preserve the legacy. But to some, those words were merely a challenge to see who could claim the biggest piece of the pie. Without a moment to waste, the family members each began plotting their next moves. Some saw an opportunity to seize power and status. Others, a chance to indulge in luxuries long denied. But as the first ripple of greed spread through the room, Obi remained still, his thoughts turning inward as he wondered what his father would have truly wanted. The days following the reading of the will were a whirlwind of activity. The once solemn and orderly mansion transformed into a hub of ambition and greed. Chika, the eldest son, was the first to act. He quickly summoned his contacts, friends, and associates, leveraging his portion of the inheritance into a series of high-stakes investments. He imagined himself as the natural heir to his father's empire, the one who would make bold moves and solidify his own name in the business world. Meanwhile, Femi and Ayo, always closer to each other than to their elder brother, saw things differently. To them, this was a chance to break free from their father's shadow. They invested heavily in nightlife ventures, lavish clubs, extravagant events, and risky businesses that promised quick returns. They were driven by a desire not just for wealth, but for a lifestyle that had always seemed out of reach under their father's stern eye. Aisha and Kemi, the two wives, took different approaches. Aisha, always the more conservative, put her money into real estate and trusted advisors. But even she could not resist the lure of more glamorous opportunities. She began dabbling in high fashion and luxury goods, confident that her business acumen would shield her from failure. Kemi, on the other hand, saw the fortune as a ticket to a life of luxury. She spent lavishly, redecorating her wing of the mansion, buying designer clothes, and, amid this frenzy, Obi stood apart. He watched quietly as his family members made their moves, one after another, seemingly oblivious to the perils they were courting. He took his time, carefully assessing his share of the inheritance, and considering how best to honor his father's unspoken expectations. While his siblings were driven by either greed or a desire for independence, Obi's motivation was different. He wanted to build something lasting, something that would not just carry the Adekunle. He sought out old associates of his father, not for quick deals but for wisdom. He asked questions, absorbed lessons, and began to invest in a portfolio that was modest but steady. Real estate that promised growth over decades, technology startups with solid foundations, and agriculture projects that could benefit local communities. These were his choices. His approach was cautious but calculated, reflecting his father's teachings of patience and prudence. As weeks turned into months, the consequences of the family's choices began to unfold. Chika's aggressive investments started to unravel. The market was less forgiving than he had anticipated, and what seemed like a sure path to doubling his fortune began to crumble. Deals fell through, partners betrayed him, and Chika found himself scrambling to salvage what was left of his once grand ambitions. His confidence waned, replaced by a simmering frustration that he directed toward anyone with Enrique. Femi and Ayo, meanwhile, experienced the darker side of their indulgent ventures. Their nightlife empire began to show cracks. Mismanagement, crime, and competition took their toll. Lavish parties became sparsely attended events, and profits turned to losses. The brothers, who had once reveled in their newfound freedom, now faced a mounting pile of debts and diminishing returns. Their bond, which had once seemed unbreakable, started to fray under the weight of their failures. Even Aisha, who had prided herself on being the most rational of the bunch, was not immune to poor decisions. Her foray into high fashion ended disastrously, with a failed launch and significant financial losses. She had underestimated the market's volatility and overestimated her own expertise in an unfamiliar industry. Her frustration grew as her careful plans disintegrated before her eyes. Kemi, on the other hand, remained largely oblivious to the impending disaster. She continued to spend recklessly, ignoring the warnings from her advisors. Her wing of the mansion, now gaudy and over-decorated, became a symbol of her excesses and denial. Through it all, Obi's steady rise continued. His investments, though conservative, began to pay off. He reinvested his earnings wisely and avoided the flashy, quick-win mentality that had ensnared his siblings. He became known in business circles for his keen insight and deliberate strategy, a young man wise beyond his years. His reputation grew quietly, in stark contrast to the increasingly desperate stories surrounding his family. As the tension within the family grew, small conflicts escalated into outright confrontations. Accusations flew, greed, betrayal, arrogance, all while Obi remained focused on his work. His calm demeanor and quiet confidence only added to the resentment from his siblings. They saw him not as a fellow heir but as a competitor, a threat to their dwindling dreams. Yet through the mounting chaos, Obi felt a sense of unease. He sensed that the family was reaching a breaking point, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play, something more than just the reckless decisions of his brothers and the stubbornness of his mothers. As the dust of their squandered wealth settled, A distinct shift began to take place within the Adekunle household. The aura of confidence and privilege that once defined the family was now replaced by tension, desperation, and blame. Yet, amidst the growing turmoil, Obi's approach continued to bear fruit. Obi's ventures were not just successful, they were meaningful. His investments in agriculture and technology began to show real returns, not just in profits, but in impact. Small communities benefited from sustainable farming projects that he initiated, while local tech startups found their footing under his mentorship. Unlike his siblings, Obi's investments weren't just about multiplying his wealth. They were about creating value and building a lasting legacy, just as his father would have wanted. News of Obi's prudent decisions and growing influence spread beyond his immediate circles. Local media began to take notice of the young Adekunle who, unlike his family, was quietly making a name for himself in the business world. Business leaders and entrepreneurs sought him out, eager to partner with someone who demonstrated wisdom beyond his years. Obi, however, remained humble, careful to measure every step he took. Within the family, however, this only intensified the sense of resentment. Chika, who had always assumed he would be the natural leader, found his ego bruised by his younger brother's success. He began to see Obi's humility not as a virtue, but as a silent reproach to his own failures. Femi and Ayo, struggling under the weight of their debts and faltering ventures, started to view Obi as a threat rather than an ally. Aisha and Kemi, each grappling with their own setbacks, were equally torn. On one hand, they could see that Obi was embodying the very values that Adekunle had tried to instill in all of them. On the other, they were mothers to sons who were struggling, and they could not help but harbor feelings of unease toward Obi's growing stature. But Obi remained steady. He continued to attend business meetings, forge new alliances, and reinvest his profits back into ventures that promised sustainable growth. His reputation as a young, visionary leader began to solidify, and it was becoming clear that he was not just a fluke or an exception. He was a force to be reckoned with. And so, as the family teetered on the brink of collapse, a shadow of foreboding loomed over the mansion. A test was approaching, one that would soon challenge them in ways they had never anticipated. The mansion was eerily quiet the day Chief Adekunle returned. Months had passed since the family had last seen him, and now, with a sense of finality, he walked back through the grand doors of his home. The family was summoned for a meeting, each one perplexed by the urgency in Obi's voice when he called them together. When they entered the grand hall, they saw him standing there, alive and well. A collective gasp filled the room. The shock and disbelief were palpable. For a moment, it seemed like they were looking at a ghost. His wives stumbled back, clutching each other in astonishment while the children stood frozen, their eyes wide with a mix of fear, confusion, and a flicker of hope. "Baba, you're alive?" Chika finally managed to stammer, breaking the tense silence. "Yes, Chika," Adekunle responded, his voice firm yet calm. "I am very much alive, and I have been watching all of you." As realization set in, the mood shifted from shock to something more complicated: embarrassment, anger, and a sense of betrayal. Adekunle explained his plan in meticulous detail: the fake accident, the cameras hidden throughout the estate, and how he had been quietly observing their every move from his secluded hideaway. "I wanted to see who you really were," Adekunle continued, his eyes sweeping over the room. "I wanted to know if I had raised a family capable of upholding a legacy, or one that would squander it at the first opportunity." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Each family member felt the weight of his judgment. Some were quick to defend themselves. Chika argued that he was only trying to expand the empire. Aisha insisted her investments were sound but unlucky, while Femi and Ayo bickered over who was to blame for their financial losses. Kemi remained mostly silent, too stunned to muster a defense. But it was Obi who remained calm, his face reflecting neither shock nor fear, but a quiet understanding. When Adekunle's gaze finally settled on him, it softened ever so slightly. "Obi," Adekunle said, "you were the only one who showed prudence, wisdom, and a sense of responsibility. You are the one who has truly proven himself worthy of what I have built." A wave of tension rippled through the room. The other siblings looked at Obi with a mix of jealousy and rage, unable to fully grasp the gravity of their father's words. Adekunle continued, laying out his decision. The bulk of the wealth and the reins of the family business would go to Obi. The others would receive enough to maintain themselves, but would no longer have direct control over the estate or its future. The reactions were immediate and volatile. Shouts of protest, accusations of favoritism, and pleas for second chances filled the air. But Adekunle remained resolute. His face, once marked by the sternness of a patriarch, now held a sadness, tinged with a sense of inevitability. "This is not about punishment," he said softly but firmly. "This is about learning what is truly valuable. I hope you all find it." The days following Adekunle's revelation were fraught with tension. The mansion, which once bustled with activity, was now filled with a heavy silence, interrupted only by the occasional outburst of a heated argument or the distant sound of someone slamming a door in frustration. The family was reeling from the sudden shift in their fortunes and struggling to come to terms with their father's judgment. Chika, once confident in his leadership potential, now found himself seething with anger and humiliation. He felt betrayed, not just by his father's deception, but by Obi's quiet assent. His pride, which had driven him to take reckless risks, now blinded him to his own mistakes. He confronted Obi one evening in the study, where their father had once conducted business. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" Chika's voice was low but filled with venom. "You think because you sat back and played it safe, you've earned all this?" Obi looked up from his desk, his expression calm but firm. "It's not about being better, Chika. It's about making choices that honor what father built." This was never a game to win or lose. Femi and Ayo soon joined the fray, siding with Chika. Their resentment had grown into something deeper, a fear that they had lost not only their inheritance but also their place in the family hierarchy. They accused Obi of manipulating their father, of being a secret favorite, and even of orchestrating the whole ordeal. "I never wanted to take anything from you," Obi responded, maintaining his composure even as the accusations flew. "I just wanted to do what I felt was right, to build something that lasts, not something that's consumed." The argument escalated, with the three brothers closing in, their words turning more hostile. For a moment, it seemed as if a physical confrontation was inevitable. But before it could come to that, Adekunle himself entered the room, his presence immediately commanding silence. "Enough!" Adekunle's voice boomed. "I raised you all to be better than this. If you continue to let jealousy and greed guide you, then you've learned nothing from this." There was a heavy pause. The gravity of Adekunle's words cut through the tension like a knife. He turned to each of his children, his expression a mix of disappointment and hope. "Obi has shown wisdom and restraint. He understood the value of what we have, not just the money, but the legacy. You can either learn from him, learn from your mistakes, or you can lose yourselves in your bitterness. The choice is yours." A fragile silence followed as Adekunle's words sank in. Chika, Femi, and Ayo exchanged glances, each realizing that continuing down this path would only lead to further ruin. The confrontation ended not with fists or more shouting, but with a reluctant understanding that perhaps, just perhaps, they had indeed been looking at things the wrong way. As weeks turned into months, the aftermath of Adekunle's dramatic return began to take shape. The family dynamics, once rigid and clear, became more nuanced as each member was forced to confront the consequences of their actions and choices. For Chika, Femi, and Ayo, the path to redemption was not easy. They had to let go of their pride and face the reality of their failures. Slowly, they began to rebuild, not just their finances but their relationships with each other and with Obi. Chika took the hardest hit, but it was also a wake-up call. He started attending business workshops, eager to learn the lessons he had ignored in his haste to prove himself. Femi and Ayo, who had once reveled in the nightlife, began to find more constructive ways to channel their energy, even seeking Obi's advice on how to start over. Aisha and Kimi, too, underwent transformations. They realized that their focus on material gain had blinded them to the more important aspects of life: family, unity, and wisdom. They began to support their children in different ways, not by pushing them to succeed at all costs, but by encouraging them to find balance and purpose. Obi, now at the helm of the Adekunle business empire, did not gloat in his success. Instead, he used his new position to foster positive change. He launched new initiatives that aligned with his father's vision, but adapted them to the modern world's challenges. He invested in sustainable development projects and community upliftment, ensuring that the Adekunle name would be associated not just with wealth, but with positive impact. Adekunle, seeing the changes in his family, felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He knew that not all wounds would heal overnight, but there was a start. He decided to take a step back, allowing Obi to lead while he focused on mentoring his other children and guiding them through their process of rediscovery. In the final moments of this chapter of their lives, the family gathered together for a dinner, not one marked by tension or silent competition, but by a shared understanding that they were stronger together. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with mistakes and missteps, but it was also necessary. As they raised their glasses to toast, Adekunle looked at each of his children with a softened gaze. "To a future where we honor what we have," he said, "and where we remember that the true legacy isn't in what we own, but in what we build together." The family echoed the sentiment, and for the first time in a long while, there was genuine hope that the name Adekunle would mean more than just wealth. It would mean wisdom, resilience, and unity. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter.